Well, that wasn't what I was expecting. For some reason, our countdown timer went away. I was fiddling with some things, and apparently, I messed up our countdown. So anyway, welcome to Firebrand Pastors, the podcast where passion meets purpose, and we are here again to tackle another topic today. We are tackling the topic. Whoa, that's a tongue twister. Tackling the topic of organization, and with me, as always, is
Mm.
my good friend and brother, Ben Good. So, Ben, how are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing all right today. It just got a whole lot hotter in Western New York, so
Mm.
that was fun. We went from having like 40-degree days to 90, so that's been great. But I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. God's gracious and He's good, and new mercies every morning. So I'm doing pretty good. So how are you doing, Bill?
Doing good today. A little
Good.
dicey yesterday, but I'm good now, which that seems to be the status quo. The status quo is there is no status quo with me. So,
Exactly.
anyway, not going to go into all my health concerns, but your prayers would be appreciated. I see we have Colleen with us today, and Colleen is a sweet sister and pretty amazing lady, if I may say so myself. Of course, we know God always gets all the glory, and if Colleen could talk right now, she would be the first one to amen that. But it's good to have you with us today, Colleen. And we are looking at organization today in the ministry. Now, we will tackle the topic on a more universal level as well. So I don't want to I don't want to turn off anybody here who is not necessarily in full time ministry because we will have some tips and tricks for you as well, especially if you're in a position, say, in your job where you have to use people skills or
Yep.
organizational skills. What we are going into today will have a more universal appeal in that regard. But, definitely we are focusing on ministry organization today, and so, I'd like to start out with a Bible verse here, and, it's 1 Corinthians 14:40, and if I were more on top of it, which I would have been if if our countdown timer hadn't have died, but, I would have had 1 Corinthians 14:40 for you, but, go ahead and grab a Bible, you can look at it, or you can just listen to me. It says this, "But all things must be done properly and in an orderly manner." I had an opportunity to actually speak to this topic, I don't know, probably a couple weeks ago, I would say, on, another live stream, but, it is, the perfect verse for this simply because 1 Corinthians 14, Paul is talking about the church. And after speaking on the topic of tongues and prophecy and all of these things that were going on, essentially he said at the end to the Corinthian church, the end of this chapter, you all are a mess. You need to get it together. And he says this, but all things must be done properly and in an orderly manner. You think about that for a moment. That verse is very pregnant with meaning because Paul's speaking to the church in general. He's talking
Mm.
about everything in the church. I mean, I believe all things really mean all things. I mean, everything in the church
Mhm.
should be organized. And if they are not, then you've got a serious problem because you have the Corinthian church, which, if you know anything about First Corinthians, you know that Paul was not flattering regarding the Corinthian church because they were such a mess. And so,
Mm.
certainly, I think this is one of the best verses we can start off with regarding church ministry. But let's be honest, Ben. We have to look at this from a more universal standpoint too, because I mean,
Mhm.
if it's good enough for the church, it should be good enough for our lives as well to be organized. Because if it's
Right.
godly, so godly that the church should be characterized by organization, then certainly we as Christians, we as believers should be characterized by being organized. I knew this one gentleman for many, many years, and he was just absolutely uh, braggadocious, proud, I don't know the word, about how disorganized he was. And he bragged to
Mm,
everyone because that was his personality and that's who he was and so on and so forth. And, you
mm,
try to talk to people like that and say, that's not very godly. The Bible
mhm,
says do everything decently in order. So we
right.
need to be careful because there are people looking on. There are people outside the church who look on us. And we need to have a good testimony. And it definitely begins with having a less than chaotic life. Sometimes you can't avoid
Yeah.
that, obviously,
Yeah.
but being organized. What do you think, Ben?
No, I think that's 100% accurate, especially, I mean, coming from a ministerial standpoint on anything. Bill, okay, so everybody knows that the pastor just gets paid to sit and read his
Yeah,
Bible
preach once a week.
preach once a week and, take off the clothes, the preaching clothes, go hang them up and go do them next week. But honestly, though, I mean, if you spend any length of time inside of ministry, you're going to know how busy ministry is. And you know what? I want to preface this. It's a good thing that we are busy. That means there's people we're serving. That means there's things that we're
Mhm.
doing. And that means there's opportunity for the gospel to be preached. Inside of that, there is it's almost a requirement in order to function in ministry in a way that's effective, to have some sort of organizational rhythm in your life.
Mhm.
And I know people, like, and everybody is different. And I know that there's a spectrum, right, of how people organize things and how they see things and how they do things. But, at the same time, like, I cannot even imagine for one moment not having things written down or knowing where things are or knowing who I'm going to see or who's my next visit, things like that, without, organizing those ahead of time. That would be so chaotic for the ministry worker in general. I don't care if you're a youth pastor, lead pastor, missionary, evangelist. I don't care what you are. You have to have some sort of, I'm going to call it, control over your schedule and what you're doing. Okay. Because it is important. And, I've always been taught this, Bill, and maybe you can speak to this. Money, or time, is a currency, just like money is a currency, right? Except for money, you can spend it and gain it back. Time, you can waste it and it'll never come back to you, right?
Mhm.
Reference Ecclesiastes in the episode we did with Brian Boardman about Ecclesiastes. You cannot get time back. And so, with that being said, the fact that we are called to, first of all, and the amazing thing is, so organization is such a vast topic and things like that, but um it just speaks to the intention of fulfilling the job that God's called us to do. And I think that there's something very pertinent to that. And so, that's kind of where my thought is. And it's interesting you use First Corinthians, right, where that church, for lack of a better term, that church was messed up.
Yeah.
And it just, which is amazing to me, but not amazing knowing its situation. But at the same time, like, there's always things we got to tighten up. There's always things that we got to organize a little bit better, try to be a little bit more efficient in. And I think that this is going to be pretty helpful, overall for everybody.
Absolutely.
Because, again, and especially if you're a parent too, man, not ministry workers and parents, I'll tell you what, and the more my daughter gets older, the more I realize how much I forget everything all the time.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm just getting old and senile, or just life's getting busier, but it is interesting. So, Bill, what are the directions we're kind of going with this topic today?
Yeah. So we'll look at some different aspects of organization. And what I call this is management.
Okay.
I know that sounds like a scary term, but when you put it in more, shall I say, professional terms, it seems like psychologically it becomes more important in our minds. And so from this point onward, I'm going to be talking about managing things. Okay, managing time. You talked about managing money, managing people. Can you manage people? Yes. I don't necessarily prefer to use that kind of term with people because
Hmm.
obviously people
Hmm.
are people. They are. some they are a thing in the sense that we move them around, and
Hmm.
in ministry we use them in places where God has equipped them to be able to be there. But at the same time, they're still people. So we have to have a little bit of a different view. But we'll look at quote unquote managing people as well. And then we'll look at everything else, just kind of throw it all in a pot at the end. And we'll talk about some of the, what do they call it? Various and sundry miscellaneous things. So
There
that's
you go.
kind of where we're headed. So let's look at managing time, first of all.
Okay.
Ephesians 5:15 through 17, the classic verse on this. Therefore, be careful how you walk, not as unwise men, but as wise, making the most of your time. Ooh, that's convicting for me, I have to admit. Making the most of your time because the days are evil. Boy, aren't they?
Mhm.
That's not in the text. It may be in the Greek somewhere, but I kind of added that there. So then do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. So we need to be managing our time. There are a lot
Yep.
of different ways of doing that. But the first principle is find a method that suits you and stick with it. Commit to that, because we do all have different strengths. Our brains work differently. We all, in one way or another, function on a different level. There are no two people alike, and so
Right.
we can't necessarily just choose a method and necessarily just kind of force it
Hmm.
onto our pattern of life. Because if we try to do that, we're going to have problems. I remember when I was going to college, the president of the college, who actually started, he was the founder and the president of the college, said that he never used anything electronic. Now this was in the 90s, so Palm Pilot was pretty much all you had. There's no such thing as smartphones and things like that. But still, they were coming out with Palm Pilots and all these what they call PDAs, not public display of affection, but personal digital assistant is what it meant in those days. And they were really cool. I used one. I loved it very much, and it helped keep me organized. But this guy said, I can't do that. I have a note card, and I put it in my pocket on my shirt, and I pull it out with the pen that's next to it, and I write down everything on that 3x5 note card. And he said it worked for me. It worked perfectly fine for me. And if I did that, I would be all over the place. I would lose my 3x5 card. I wouldn't be
Hmm.
able to find it. I have a hard enough time keeping track of my phone, which is very important. And so that method wouldn't necessarily work for me. It worked for him and it was very effective. He ended up founding this college, which is still going today, Pensacola Christian College. They have, they produce curriculum, a back a book, and they've just really been successful on the Christian scene. And so, obviously, 3x5 cards worked for him. For me, I have to be a little bit more detailed. But you may be the 3x5 card person. You may be the electronic person. You may be the write it down on a piece of paper,
Hmm.
a scrap piece of paper and stick it in your pocket and you can keep track of it person. Whatever you are, find a method that suits you and stick to that method, because if you don't, you're you're going to have problems. Uh,
Hmm.
num- Number two. Okay. And Ben, you already spoke to this. And I'll let you comment on this one because I could
Okay.
tell when you were talking about it that you just relished this one. So I'll just kind of throw this one at you. Write things down always.
Yeah.
Always write them down, whether you're
Hmm.
typing on a word processor, whether you're typing on, a calendar, one of the electronic calendars, whether you do what my wife does, and she's got a calendar on the side of her refrigerator, our refrigerator, and she writes down everything on that, whether it's lists that you put into various programs or you put on a piece of paper, whatever it is,
Hmm.
write it down. So, Ben, what are some ways that you mentioned it earlier, so I'm gonna put you on the hot seat. There's some
No, that's all
ways that
right.
you
I
fulfill
mean,
this.
how much time do we actually have? I mean, I got a lot. I use a lot of things. to
We're
try
only
to
15 minutes
organize my
into it,
day.
so we should be good.
Yeah,
We had extra time because the countdown
yeah.
didn't work because I
This
messed it
is
up.
it's a bonus one, you know. No, I have on so I'm trying to unpack this as my daily thing. So I am an avid user of Microsoft To-Do List, that
Yes.
is attached
Yes.
to Microsoft Outlook.
Yes.
I am not a Microsoft fanboy. I am very much an Apple person. But what I will say is this: um, my to-do list and my calendar and my email are all on me at all times, like to keep myself organized. I have to refer to my calendar probably every day. um if not, like, you know, it's kind of like our whole gig. So anyways, so I use Microsoft To-Do List. I also use my phone's app. I don't use reminders. I don't ever use that. That's a very weird one for me, but I do use notes on my phone to
Mhm.
keep track of things. As far as even a daily thing, I've made myself a 2 column. It's almost like the old steno books that you could get at, you know, Walmart or whatever. And put it on my iPad that connects to my computer.
Mhm.
So I can literally write down I'll just give you an example. From 1:30 to 2:06 I did this, and I have it written down as a record of what I do and what I did, who I talked to, who I was encountering. And that's just recently that I started doing that, but I found it very helpful because it made me more intentional of my time. And I also have, like, in my office, there's a whiteboard. I have a physical calendar and I have my digital calendar. Like, I'm just going to be upfront with you. I have a very type A kind of personality where I have to have everything like in order. And my wife is very not a type A personality, so it kind of meshes well together.
Mhm.
But, you know, as a testament to what you were talking about earlier, you know, talking about the days of PDAs, I have a funny story just to interject here. When I was in first or second grade, when Bill was my first and second grade teacher, you had a PDA there
Mhm.
at the school.
Yep.
And I remember thinking that this was the coolest thing in the world. Okay, because this would have been 01 or '02 in that
Yeah.
area.
Yeah.
And you had a PDA that you had this game of submarines on, and you showed
Mm.
us that it had the game of submarines. And
Yes.
I thought that that was the coolest thing in the whole entire world. So what he's telling you is actually 100% correct. Like, I've seen the PDA era of Bill Brown. Okay, so like that is an existing thing. But I mean, for me, I have to have everything written down. I am a write it down on a notebook. I mean, even in the sermon notes that I do, like if I'm doing research, I have a notebook for sermon notes. I have a notebook for prayers. I have a notebook for personal things. Like I have to write this stuff down because in my mind, the more organized that I am, I mean, if you look at my file folder in my computer, it's organized. Like, I cannot live in a very unorganized, chaos filled life. So that is kind of and that's kind of where I'm coming from, and, you know, playing. And I think it helps with right here right now, but it also helps with planning ahead in the future for ministry. um and I think I think pastors will get this when I say this. It gives you the freedom when you know what's going on to say yes or no to things,
All right.
right? Like, it gives you the
Yeah.
freedom to do those things. And I think that's vitally important because as pastors, there are things we have to say no to, um, because, you know, and time management's important. So can we get things done during the day and organized throughout the day in order so we can spend time with our family at night, or vice versa? However that works in our family dynamic, right? I think it speaks to that as well. So I think organization as far as time is huge. I do not like to waste time. I am very my brain doesn't work like that. I can't do that. I don't know. It's just that's how God made me, and I'm okay with that. So that's kind of where I'm coming from on that. I hope that makes sense a little bit. Um, but yes, writing everything down is my thing. Like, the only thing I don't do is sticky notes. Those things drive me nuts. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I like the sticky notes, that the sticky note program that Microsoft came up with, and you can, like,
Oh,
put
yeah.
it on your desktop. That I did
Mhm.
well with. I used that for a while, but then they discontinued sticky notes with Windows, and, I don't know. I think they brought it back, but I just never got back into it after they discontinued it, and they made it less functional. So, as far
You
as,
know,
like, yellow sticky notes,
yeah.
nah, I would lose them.
So, I was just thinking about this, as how it is kind of weird, Bill. We're talking about having physical and digital reminders of things. How that kind of correlates to the fact that you and I are both huge Logos users,
Mhm,
and we have everything pretty much digitally, but I know we also use physical as well. It's just a very interesting kind of
mhm,
thought process. But anyways, even that, my books are organized by title
mhm.
and everything
Yep.
like that. So, yeah. So no, I am very much a write it down kind of guy.
Yeah, absolutely, and everybody has different ways of doing things.
Hmm.
I for a while, I did the, write it down on a piece of paper, even after the PDA stage,
Hmm.
because there was kind of a transition from PDAs into smartphones, and
Right.
as odd as it sounds, I did not make the smartphone, transition very well. So, for one thing, smartphones were very expensive. PDAs, you could pick one up for mine was actually a Palm Pilot. You could pick it up for like $60, one of the cheap
Mhm.
ones. It was really simple. You didn't have, I mean, that game was probably one of maybe 2 games or 3
That and
games that
probably
were
like
on it.
Centipede or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
Pong. But, anyway, all that to say, it took me a while to get back into the electronic thing after transitioning from PDA to, into
Hmm.
smartphone. But I made the transition, and, what I have today is, an interesting, I guess you could say, conglomeration
Hmm.
of ways that I do things. Because, I think I'm probably more spatial than you are in
Okay.
that regard.
Well, unpack that. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so, I like to see things, out in the open, and, I
Yeah.
mean, I do well with lists. I love Microsoft To Do. That is, like, one of the simplest programs. That's like the software version of a Palm Pilot,
Yeah.
of a PDA. And so, yeah, I do definitely like that. But, I will say that I like programs where I can, snip it, even if it's
Mhm.
virtual, and put it in. And so one of the ones that I use, and maybe I can do this. I didn't even think about actually, well, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I was thinking about actually showing you my OneNote program, but you would probably have nightmares if I did that. But if you're not familiar with OneNote, it has notebooks. And I have notebooks for writing. I have notebooks for Bible study. I have notebooks for ministry. I have notebooks for a notebook, I should say, for videos, making videos, things like this, live
Right.
stream. I've got, anyway, and they're all different colors. And you can see over on the left hand side all the notebooks. And then when you click on one, it'll take you to pages, and each page has basically clippings. And so you can clip things from like the internet, from digital books, things like that. You can type your own things in there. It's very spatial in the sense that you can pretty much click anywhere and you can have an absolute mess of a page, things not lining up straight, which I'm a little bit obsessive compulsive. So that drives me nuts. So I always, even everything else so it looks good.
Yeah.
But anyway, I love OneNote because if I have an idea and I need to write it down and I'm by my computer or I have my phone because you can get OneNote for your phone too. I'm set because if I wait, I kid you not, if I wait 2 or 3 minutes, I will forget what that idea is and never remember it again or
Right.
remember it like 5 years from now. And so if I have an idea that pops into my head, I have to write it down right away. I've even forgotten ideas opening up one note on my phone before. I mean, how long does that take? 30 seconds and I forget the idea. So I'm
No,
the
I
type that
get
has
that.
to, yeah, I have to write it down because I just have too many things going on in my brain. And I
No,
do that
I'm like that.
with one note.
I'm like that with I use a and this kind of fits in with the organization aspect too. I use a application. It's mainly an internet application. It's not so much like a software application. That is called Sermonary, and
Mhm.
it
Right.
is a sermon constructor. And it's basically a hybrid word processor that moves around blocks. Anyways, it's not that's part's not important, but they have what I love about that program is they have whenever you are typing out a sermon, they have this little light bulb icon on the left hand side, and it just says ideas, and it's a place where you can go and refer back to the old ideas that you've had, or write a new idea that maybe you're thinking about, like, oh, this doesn't pertain to this, but if I ever preached out of here, this would work here.
Yeah.
And I've found myself using that because, Bill, that is one of the things I think is why I write things down and I type things up so much is because I don't want to lose that train of thought. I don't want to lose that time I spent. And, of course, whenever we do that, it's like the golden nugget of a sermon, right? Like it's the,
Yeah.
oh, that would make everything make sense.
Yes.
and then,
Yes,
and then
exactly.
it's just like,
That
yeah, like
illustration ties it
goldfish.
all
Yeah.
together, and now I can't remember what the
Yes.
illustration was.
Right.
Yes.
That's exactly it. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I'm right there with you on that. It's tough. But okay, so what is our next kind of okay, so we're just talking about time, managing time.
Yeah.
What's our next grouping here?
The next one, is actually more of a sub point of what we just talked about, but,
Mm,
more specific. Writing things down was more ideas,
right.
but also, and you already spoke to this, but use calendars and lists,
Hmm.
because that is important as well. It's not just throwing a bunch of stuff in a notebook and going from there. Using calendars and lists are so important. Like you said, Ben, you spoke on making sure that you keep visits and things like that uh,
Hmm.
separated, or organized, so that you can separate them in your brain and say, okay, this is what I need to do
Hmm.
for the day or what have you. It is important to do that. Everybody, I don't care how disorganized you are, everybody should have a calendar, because calendars are what keep everything running smoothly. We have a calendar for our show here. Today's topic, because we were talking right up almost to the end about what we were actually going to speak about today, even though we've been talking about this for 2 weeks. But we normally I have it put on the calendar what we're going to be doing. If we have a guest, I'll put that on a calendar. I mean, even something as simple as a weekly show that we do like this,
Hmm.
I keep a calendar for, because I'll tell you what, I won't remember
Right.
who's coming on next week or what topic we're talking about or what have you if I don't write it down somewhere. And so I try to keep up on that calendar. I don't always. There are times where church ministry takes over the week or what have you, which that's my
Hmm.
day job. So obviously that's the most important thing. But all that to say, calendars, church calendars, personal calendars, things like that. If you're an individual, make sure you have a calendar. And it's as simple as just bringing it up on your smartphone if you have a smartphone. It's not that difficult. Or my wife, every year, she gets a calendar for Christmas,
Yep.
and she puts it up on the side of our refrigerator, and she writes everything down there, and it works really well for her. Whatever, like we talked about at the beginning, whatever the system is, choose
Yep.
it, run with it. But there are certain characteristics that every system should have, and one of them is obviously time management with calendars. So
Right.
make sure you do that. And of course, right behind that is to do lists, which you can write on your calendar if you have a paper calendar. You can write that right on
Hmm.
your calendar if you want to, and just kind of combine steps. But that's really important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's see. We have any comments? Oh, Marilyn says this. I make lists, graphs, charts, and calendars type of person.
Yes,
You
she
know what?
does.
That checks out. That
Yeah,
checks out.
yeah, yeah.
Even when I was a kid, when she was teaching me algebra, she was the most thorough person with that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Just crazy.
Yeah,
But
she still does. She's still
yeah,
that way. Yeah.
that does not surprise me whatsoever.
Mhm.
So, Bill, we're talking about. Do you want to transition to our next one about managing people a little bit, or
Yeah,
did you have
sure.
something else you want to talk
Yeah,
about?
managing people in ministry. This can
Mhm.
apply if you have a job. This could apply to your job. If you have a family, let's say you're a housewife and you have children at home. These can apply to that as well. Just about any place where you would use a management system. The principles we drew up are generic, so they can apply to just about anything. The first one, not so much. This certainly would apply maybe to a job, certainly to ministry, and most definitely to pastors. And that's simply this: remain strong in your strengths. In other words, do what you can do, but
Mhm.
staff in your weaknesses. I know that sounds cliche. And anybody who has ever gone through any kind of leadership training has heard that principle. But it's true
Yeah.
because what we as pastors have a tendency to do, and a lot of people who manage other people have a tendency to do, is to try to do it all ourselves. Right? If I want
Mhm.
something done right, I need to do it myself. And I
Mhm.
used to joke about that. But it wasn't so funny when I realized that I actually live by that sometimes. And so there are times where we just have to say, okay, I could do this, but I couldn't do it nearly as well as John Doe over here. So I'm going to pass
Right.
that on to John Doe. So remain strong in your weaknesses. Continue
Yeah.
to do, or in your strengths, continue to do what you do best,
Yep.
but find those things that you don't do well and pass those on to someone else. Because I'll tell you what, they'll probably be blessed by the fact that you even asked them to do that. And they'll certainly do a better job than you could anyway.
Right. No, I even in coming into that and I want to touch on something maybe as well. What you just said, I think is a pride killer is knowing that you can't do anything or everything all the time.
Mhm.
And especially in ministry, trying to do all the things you're first of all, let me backpedal. You're not meant to do everything by yourself. That is why we are called the body. And the body is made up of many members. And
Yeah.
that is a huge thing because there are strengths and weaknesses. And Bill, that I don't know if it's close to what you're saying, but it's that same adage of put your aces in their places kind of thing,
Mhm.
where you're putting the people that are best equipped for the solution into where they're needed, and that's a huge thing. Like for me, I love doing kind of like office work. That is just kind of like, I don't know, I'm weird, I guess I don't know. My wife calls me weird, so I guess it's true. But at the same time, I just you know for me is just again knowing and what that is intentionally as well. And I know we're talking about managing people in the context of ministry, but what that is doing is allowing the people that God has given a gift to do what they're doing. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Like if there is a certain thing about like I have an elder on our team here that is fantastic at administration, way better than I am at it. So guess what? He gets to handle administration.
Mhm.
Or for example, I have another elder here who is in the big evangelical world, we'd call them care pastors, but he's such a good uh, person to go into a nursing home, and he's so gentle and like it just organizing your giftings, I guess, is another way of putting that as well inside the church to make it run smoothly, which is a
Mm.
good thing. That's a helpful thing, I think. In On top of that, I think that's a way that we can honor God in its fullest is really appreciating the things that he's given us and using it and stewarding. And I think that word and organizational management and stewarding probably go together hand in hand, because we're stewarding what God has given us in a responsible and orderly way. And it just it kind of makes sense in that capacity. So you know um and even and you know, even to apply this to a secular position, okay, before I was a pastor at Riverside Chapel, I was also you know, 2 or 3 years before that, I was a manager um of an organization, and I'm not going to specify what that organization was, but you know, you're in charge of putting people on certain shifts or putting people um where they're best suited. Uh,
Mhm.
and part of that is, you know, you're relationally knowing them, and that's a good thing where you're able to say, hey, you're, this person's better over here, this person's better over there. But you know, it is a huge point of organization as well, because as the church, man, we do need to know how to put one foot in front of the other and just keep walking, you know. And sometimes we, if you are unorganized, it bogs itself down, and then all of a sudden you're tripping on everything because the left foot doesn't know what the right foot's doing, right? So that's a huge part of ministry too, I think. So
Absolutely. That's certainly true. And this the next principle that we'll be going over goes right along with this one. Obviously, we want people who are qualified in various
yep,
positions. But
yep.
here's one that all of us, and I'm certainly, I am the chief of sinners when it comes to this. And it's simply this: there are people who are qualified who are not qualified in the church. And I've seen this happen a lot of times where somebody, and it didn't happen at Grizzly Flats community, but I've seen it happen many times. We had an amazing gentleman who was taking care of our books, and he was a godly man, real deal believer, loved the truth, sometimes too much. And those of you who go to Grizzly Flats Community Church, if you're watching this, you know who I'm talking about. I'm not going to mention his name, but he was a great guy, very blunt, very straightforward, the exact guy you want handling money. And so he was treasurer, and he was qualified in every way. I mean, he did real estate, so he
Right.
handled um, those aspects of money, and you know, he because he dealt with large amounts of money, so he knew what he was doing when it came to managing money, and so he knew the ins and outs of treasury work before we ever brought him on as the treasurer, and that actually happened before I came. But you know, there I've seen situations where somebody like that, but not a godly man, a
Right.
man who has all kinds of issues, will become
Mhm.
treasurer. Well, and you ask, well, why is this man a treasurer? And normally you get, well, he's qualified. Well, how is he qualified? Well, he is, you know, he's an accountant, or you know, he deals with real
Mhm.
estate, or what have you. And I've heard pastors do this. They'll go down all the different qualifications. It's the most important qualification, even for a treasurer, for a gardener, for anybody who works in the church in an official position. The most important attribute is to be godly, pure and simple. And so, no matter how small the position is, always make sure that spiritual people are those who are on your staff, because it's the way it is. And you know, sometimes you can't help it. I walked into a good situation because, in that regard, because the people who were in positions of leadership for the most part were qualified in every way. But, you know, there are times where you don't necessarily have that call. You know, you don't have
Yeah.
control over that. And I get that. That is true. But the fact is, we need to make sure that spiritual people are in positions of leadership, no matter how big or how small they are, because the church very simply is spiritual by nature. And so therefore should be spiritual people. We should not have the attitude of one pastor that I talked to, and you know, he was asking me, what how do you choose people who work in your church? And I said, well, I look at their spiritual lives first of all. And I kid you not, this pastor said this to me. He said, oh, well, I'd rather have somebody qualified than somebody spiritual. And I went, you've got to
Mhm.
be kidding me. And you know, you could see how this pastor functioned. He had a lot of unsaved people that were doing things that they should not have been doing. And you know, that's a difficult place to be, but it's one of those things where you make your own bed, you have to lie in it
Mm,
because, if you start to staff from the perspective of what are their physical earthly skills before you look at what their spiritual skills are, you're gonna have some problems. So,
yeah,
make sure spiritual people are in positions regardless of how big or how small they are in the church.
yeah, yeah. And yeah, I mean, I can't really even add anything else to that except for when somebody's spiritual aptitude is matched with what the Bible says about
Yeah,
anything,
yeah,
it will definitely help because you're going to view the job differently, right? You're going to view the job not as just a 9 to 5 clock in, clock out. You're going to see, oh, well, this bringing God glory in
yes.
what I'm doing right now. That I think is a huge factor inside of that, and you know, there's a lot to be said about that. But I think that's a really helpful tidbit of information. And realistically, for the average small town pastor, managing people is managing volunteers.
Mhm.
And
Yes,
it's not
yes.
necessarily staff, right? And
It's a
I
it's a
mean,
501(c)(3), it's a
right,
it's a nonprofit, so, at least we're 501(c)(3), but by
right,
nature, it's a nonprofit, so you go by grabbing anybody who can be put in that, who has the skills to do
yeah,
that, but the church, it's not just a nonprofit, is it?
well,
It's
yeah,
a spiritual entity, it's the body of Christ first and foremost, so,
yeah. Well, it's just again, it's extremely helpful to keep in mind that our goal is to be God honoring and God exalting. That's the big thing.
yeah.
So what is the let's kind of round this out for the next 15 minutes or so that we have. Um, how do you what is the next thing that we need to talk about in organization?
Well, let's get a bonus one in here because you can manage time and do
Hmm.
pretty well. Managing people, I don't want to say that's the easiest part of it, but in the church ministry, at least for
Right.
me, it's been a joy. And hey, that last principle, I've made a lot of mistakes where I've put people in positions. It's like, whoa, you're not the person that I thought you were. We've had to remove people before from positions because we made a mistake on that. And it wasn't a pleasant thing to happen. But for the most part, I would say that moving people around has been a lot of fun because I love dealing with God's people. It's enjoyable. But it, there's more than just, dealing with time and dealing with people and managing those things. We also have to know how to manage our money. And certainly
Hmm.
in ministry, that's important as well. In fact, our very testimony sometimes with the world sometimes hinges on how well we deal with money. And, I remember hearing one gentleman who was making some comments he shouldn't have been making, but he essentially, I don't want to say he made some accusations about the way that we were using money, but he definitely said some things that were untrue.
Yeah.
And there are enough of those kinds of people, and this guy claimed to be a believer, by the way. Um, After that, I kind of questioned whether he was or not. But there are enough people who make up things that are absolutely false regarding money because that's their God, that's their focus. And the world is certainly that way. The world is very much focused on money. And so when a church falls hard because of financial reasons, somebody embezzled money, pastor embezzled money, or the treasurer or whoever, the world other than sexual impropriety, I don't think there's anything the world loves more than to see a church fall hard because of
Hmm.
money,
Yep.
because they feel like that's the ugliest thing in the world, probably even more than
Right.
sexual impropriety, because for the world, money is their god. And they like to see their god, quote unquote, get the upper hand in that situation. So it's so important to be able to know how to manage money, not just for a church, but as Christians. It's so
Hmm.
important for us to know how to manage money because the world is looking on. And if we are truly to have a good reputation with those who are within and without, then certainly money is one of those things that we need to talk about managing. And certainly, I'm not even going to mention any passages regarding money because I think most of us probably, if we've if we've gone through any kind of biblical money course, then we probably know a lot of various passages. But let me just say this because I don't want to beleaguer the point. Money itself is something that God gives us. It's a
Right.
resource that God gives us. He owns the
Yeah.
cattle on 1,000 hills. That doesn't mean that he owns all the cattle that we don't. That doesn't mean that he owns all the cattle that are running wild. It means he has all the cattle. He owns them all, every single one, even the ones we own. And because I've heard that passage misapplied. It's like he owns cattle on 1,000 hills, and we want to we want to make sure that we ask God for our cattle or what have you. Well, no, 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 no. He owns them all, even the ones we have, and we're just simply stewards of his cattle, of those things that he already owns, that he allows us to manage. And certainly money, being very careful, not just in church, but say even our own personal finances, where we don't get heavily in debt. And then
Right.
we have to dig ourselves out of debt. I get it. Houses and things like that cost a lot of money, and so we take out loans. I know some people look down on that. I don't necessarily look down on that, but
No.
credit cards are a little different. We get credit cards and go, oh, I got lots of money. No, you don't. You have lots of credit, and you have to pay it back at some point in time.
Right.
So it's really important that we manage money, not get deep into debt, but be in a position where when God calls, we can give because if we attend a church, we should be financially supporting that church. Certainly, that's one way that we worship God. But
Yep.
if we are deep in debt and we're trying to dig ourselves out, we will not be able to do that the way we want to. And so it's
Yep.
important to be very careful with money.
Absolutely. No, I mean, you can't attest to anything better than that. And I just, it's amazing to me because there's certain hot button issues within the church that are just so flammable, and
Mhm.
that is one of them. And organizational management when it comes to this kind of stuff is pertinent and it's key. Um, and again, Bill, I think it all comes down to that exact point that you just were talking about, the stewardship aspect of it, and we're just
Mhm.
managing what God has given us. Lest we forget that He owes us nothing, but He gives us freely
Yes.
everything that He has
Yes.
given us, and the fact that we have the privilege of partaking in anything that He's given us is a gift. So the fact that we can manage just the small sliver in the life cycle of the church it's kind of an awesome thing, and it's one of the most God honoring things that we can do. And to the people out there who are in ministry, just remember this: like, the people you serve, the least you can give them is organization. And the people that you love, the least you can do is give them organization, because what that shows is a priority of time and a priority of priorities. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, it's just
Yeah.
it gives you the ground in which to stand on when it comes to certain issues. And so, I mean, whether it's your family, whether it's your church, or whether it is your job, it is all very pertinent things. So, I mean, I think that we've had a pretty good conversation today, Bill. I know we're at the 49-minute mark. I know we're 10
Mhm.
minutes shy of an hour, but at the same time, I don't want us to beat a dead horse or hit the
Nope.
same drum. And I'm sure Preston will say something about the dead horse thing again. Sorry, buddy. Um, but at the same time, I'm very grateful for things like this. And one of the cool thing is, so can I just give like a little side nugget of just maybe something
Sure.
to think about?
This is our bonus section, so feel
Yeah,
free.
you know, organizing ministry, your job, your family, and everything is great, and it's essential. Organizing our spiritual life is vitally essential as well.
Yes.
We didn't
Absolutely.
talk about that, but I think it's something we need to talk about just for a couple minutes. You can prioritize everything that you want in your life, But if you're not prioritizing, really a couple of things. Number one is getting time in the Word, organizing your life
Mhm.
so you are structured around there. Are you giving God your best or your leftovers? Um, Praying. I know it sounds so goofy, but some of us forget on a daily basis to even pray. Set aside time, organize your life so you have time to pray. If you find yourself where you're like, I cannot figure out when to pray, well, make time. That's what the use of having organizational management is. Make
Mhm.
the time to pray. Make the time to have the Romans 12:1 and 2 mindset of laying yourself as a living sacrifice. That's priority of management as well, because again, you're focusing on God, and the way that you see God, the way that you worship God is going to translate into how you live for God. So in that mentality, keeping that in line. And also, I would say this too. um Prioritize not doing things. I know that's a crazy idea, right?
Mhm.
Prioritize not doing things, or resting. Those are really key things in a very hectic and chaotic life. And I've heard the term, it's just organized chaos, uh, or herding cats when it comes to people. That
Yeah.
that's also true. However, organizing all of those kind of foundational principles, it'll be amazing once you start organizing the scriptures, your prayer life, your living, and your rest. All of those things will make its way into how you organize your day and how you organize people and how you organize money, and the posture in which you view those things, which I think is
Mhm.
critical as well. Because you know what, like, we don't want to become legalist. We want to be able to say we're doing this truly and with a full heart of gratitude for the glory of God alone.
Mhm.
So like that is
Exactly.
that is a very special thing. I think I might be wrong. I'm 29. What do I know, Bill? What do I know? I'm only 29 years old. But I'm telling you what, I really have found that creating a healthy rhythm of ministry has been extremely helpful. And creating my wife and I, just even in our family, has been extremely helpful. And just it there, you will not regret. James talks about this, and James, I think it's James 4, the very end of James 4, that life is but a vapor. It's like a mist. You're here and you're gone, right? Very Solomon-esque kind of wording. That to be said, what do we do with the life that we're given, right? As a famous, and we'll close with this, man, because this is a great ending. In the words of Dr. John Piper himself, do not waste your life.
Mm.
And so there we go.
Yeah.
So, Bill,
I've
got
actually got
anything
one more.
else?
I've actually got one more principle. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
But
geez.
well,
I didn't
no.
even know that.
No, 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 that's okay because it segues perfectly with what you just said, and,
Oh,
I've got this under everything else, not because it's everything else, but because it's everything, and, no, I'm glad you said what you said because it was perfect. Remember that God remains at the center of organization.
yep.
It's not that he is and this is what people do, and I think you were speaking to this point very well, so, I appreciate that. But, people think of God as, a number on a list. God is number 1, and then family, and then job, and then no, that's not true. God you have to think of life as a wheel,
Yeah.
and, everything that we do, everything we wanna get accomplished, everything we feel like we are on this earth is a
Mhm.
spoke on that wheel.
Yeah.
And God is in the center, he's the hub, and that's
Yeah.
really how we need to think of it, and so to speak to your point, which you spoke it very beautifully, by the way, make sure that God is the center of your day, and that is you start with him.
Yeah.
He's not just the beginning, he's the center of it all, and
Right.
so make sure that you realize that God always remains the central focus of your day, your life, your family, everything. He should
Yeah.
be in all of it, and, certainly the way you organize says a lot about that.
One of my elders once gave me, or we were doing a Bible study, and it's this little nugget of wisdom that he's kind of known for. We were talking about Romans 12:1 and 2 in Bible study.
Yeah.
And we were talking about how we're supposed to lay our bodies down as a living
Mhm.
sacrifice because it's our spiritual worship.
Yep.
And I was trying to find a way to articulate it, and he just says one sentence that fixed it all.
Okay.
And
Cool.
and it was amazing. He said, "It's the least we can do
Mhm.
for God. It's the least we can do."
Mhm.
And knowing, because Paul talks about this doctrine of salvation for almost 8 chapters, and he talks about the plan of salvation for humanity from 9 to 11, and then 12 he finally comes to this crux moment. Now that you've learned all this stuff, do something with it. And it's kind of a cool kind of thing. So, you know, it's the least we can do for our king, man. And I think sometimes we don't see him as that, and it's again a priority thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that to be said, I am good with how this ended.
Yeah.
This was a
I
good
agree.
episode. I am pretty pumped. I'm glad to be back. I know I took a 2-week hiatus, but I am super glad to be back. And I just want to shout out, even though I wasn't on the 2 weeks ago, I still watched the episode with Preston and Derek. And let me tell
Yes.
you what, that was a killer episode. So go back and listen to that. Because Dr. Derek Brown and Preston, man, they were talking about practical essentials of children with disabilities inside of ministry, and that was awesome.
Yeah.
That was, I think, such a good word for the church. And so, I encourage you guys to do that. Obviously, follow us on the socials. You guys see down in the thing down here, I don't know what that's called, the ribbon. This
Mhm.
is my Twitter. This is Bill's Twitter, and then this is our YouTube channel. So, if because our most of our traffic, to be honest with you, comes from YouTube. So I am, at least from what I see, that is a key thing. So make sure you like the videos and then subscribe to our channel. And then, the more you guys engage with us, the more we're able to engage with you. But also it shows the Google machine that we're actually like saying something that people want to hear. So go ahead and leave a comment. And plus, listen, we are for the local church. We love you guys. So we want to be a community. And Firebrand Pastors was built on the premise of bringing real life ministry to real life people. So like that is a huge thing. So I appreciate all you guys that watched all the way up to this point. I see you 2 people on YouTube that we have.
Got a
And I am
couple
so
on
grateful for that.
Instagram too.
There we go, man. See,
Yeah.
look, I mean, that's awesome. And I know Bill's posting some links down in the YouTube's doobly doo thing down there. So just make sure you check those out too. But that's all I got, Bill. You got anything as we wrap up today?
At this point in time, no. I do
Okay.
want to just encourage people, just to kind of reiterate what you said, to visit these links. Actually, the 2 links that I posted are both our website, which is formerfirebrand.com. And we say former Firebrand, the home of Firebrand pastors. But
Yep.
we do have a specific page for Firebrand pastors, but you can take a look at the rest of the website. We do have other resources there. I have a blog that I post to every once in a while. I haven't in a couple
They
weeks.
are excellent.
Yeah.
They are
Yeah, I
excellent blog
probably
posts.
actually need to post some, huh?
Yeah, no, every time you come out with a blog post, I'm just like, this is gold. This man has golden fingers as he's typing. But anyways, um,
Sometimes I feel like I have golden fingers, like, oh man, type the
not
wrong
not to
thing.
not to toot your horn, Bill, but I'm just
No, I know what you mean. Maybe they're more like lead. I don't know. But anyway, yeah, we have lots of resources on there. We have some books
yeah,
that you can take a look at. Both of us, have talked about books in our bookshelf. We have some of
yeah,
those on that website and lots more. And we're adding to it. So feel free to
yeah,
visit formerfirebrand.com and take a look at that. It's free. We don't charge you to get on our website. So feel free to visit that and take a look.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, you know what? Let's pray for everybody before we end the episode tonight, Bill. Let's do
Sure.
that. Father, I thank you for everybody who's listening tonight. God, I pray that you are gloriously magnified through everything that we talked about. God, you are the center of our life. So, God, just let our lives fall in line with that. Father, you are just so good to us. And God, I just pray that this week exemplifies what you are in our life. So, Father, we thank you, we love you, and you're above all, in all, and through all. And God, may your glory be shown. And Father, we ask this all through your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
All right. We'll see you next week, guys.
Yep. Thank you for joining us for Firebrand Pastors. Until next time, God bless.